Her name was Maya, 38 years old, a high school art teacher in Savannah, Georgia, with paint-stained fingers that never quite came clean, a secondhand couch she loved more than most people, and a habit of driving with the windows down even in November, because silence, she'd learned, was something you had to choose. Otherwise, the noise of everything you'd been carrying just got louder. Maya wasn't a stepdaughter. She wasn't a forgotten child in some blended family drama. She was something perhaps more confusing, more invisible. She was the good daughter. The one who did everything right. The one who graduated, got a job, called on Sundays, remembered birthdays, came home for Christmas even when coming home felt like pressing a bruise. She had an older brother named Derek, charming, scattered, perpetually in some kind of crisis, and for as long as Maya could remember, Derek had been the son that her parents orbited. Not because they loved him more. At least, that's what she told herself for a long time. It was because Derek needed more. He needed bail money at 23, and a place to stay at 26, and a loan that became a gift at 30. He needed interventions and second chances and family meetings where everyone sat around the kitchen table in that particular heavy silence that meant something was being left unsaid. Maya sat at those tables too. She always did. She brought food sometimes. She listened. She nodded. No one ever called a meeting for Maya, because Maya was fine. Maya had always been fine. Maya was the child her parents pointed to when they needed to feel like they hadn't failed. At least there's Maya. But she was also the child they never worried about, never checked on, never thought to ask, "Hey, how are you really doing?" The answer, had anyone asked, was complicated. She was doing fine in all the ways that are visible, and quietly unraveling in all the ways that aren't. It started small. A comment from her mother at Thanksgiving when Maya was 24. "You're so independent. You don't need us the way Derek does." Said with admiration, maybe even pride. But Maya had driven home that night with the windows down in the Georgia cold and thought, when did not needing people become a compliment? When did I stop being allowed to need anything at all? She replayed her childhood like a film she'd watched too many times, looking for the scene where it shifted. Where she became the responsible one, the capable one, the one who handled things. She couldn't find a single moment. It was gradual, the way a river reshapes a stone. Nobody decided it. It just became true. Her father, James, was a quiet man. A good man in a lot of ways. He worked hard, he never raised his voice, he coached Little League when they were kids. But there's a particular kind of emotional absence that exists in men of his generation, the kind that isn't dramatic or mean, just simply there, a closed door with no explanation. Maya had spent her whole life knocking on that door in small ways. A drawing she showed him at 7. A painting she won an award for at 16. The career she built with her own 2 hands. He always nodded. He always said, "That's great, babe." And that was the whole of it. There was a moment, when Maya was 35, when she sat next to her father at a family barbecue. Just the two of them on the back porch steps, paper plates balanced on their knees. She thought, this is it. This is the moment. I'm just going to talk to him. She told him about a mural project she was doing with her students, how meaningful it was, how one of her kids had cried when they finished it. She was glowing telling it. She could feel it. He listened. Then his phone buzzed. Derek was calling. He stood up, answered it, walked inside. Maya sat on those steps alone for a while. Then she threw away her paper plate and went to find her mother. That's the thing about being the capable child in a family like hers. You learn to throw things away quickly. You learn not to leave evidence of disappointment. Wherever you're watching this from, drop a comment below. Tell me your country, and tell me if you've ever felt like the invisible child, the one who is always fine. I want to hear from you. The call came on a Tuesday. Maya was grading papers at her kitchen table, a cup of tea gone cold beside her, when her mother's name lit up her phone. This wasn't unusual. Her mother called semi-regularly, the kind of calls that lasted 11 minutes and covered surface things. The weather, Derek's latest situation, a neighbor's health scare, a recipe she'd seen on TV. Maya had learned to participate in these calls the way you participate in a waiting room, present, patient, not really there. But this call was different from the first sentence. Maya, her mother said, and her voice had that particular texture, thick, careful, that meant something real was underneath it. I need to talk to you about something I should have said a long time ago. Maya set down her red pen. Her mother had been going to therapy. Maya didn't know this until that moment. She'd started 6 months ago, she said, after her doctor told her that the knot in her chest she'd been calling stress was actually grief. Grief for her own mother, dead 12 years, never properly mourned. The therapist had asked her to think about who else in her life she might owe things to. Apologies, acknowledgments, presents. Maya's name had come up more than once. I think I failed you, her mother said. Not in the loud ways, but in the quiet ones. And I think the quiet ones might be worse. Maya didn't say anything for a moment. Outside her window, a kid was riding a bike in slow circles on the sidewalk, going nowhere in particular, happy about it. She watched him. Mom, she finally said, I've been waiting for you to say that for 15 years. And then, unexpectedly, almost against her will, she laughed. Not a bitter laugh. Something more cracked open than that. The kind of laugh that lives right next to crying and sometimes trades places with it without warning. Her mother laughed too, softly, wet-eyed probably on the other end. And for the first time in Maya's adult life, the phone call went long. Past 11 minutes. Past 30. An hour. Her tea stayed cold. The papers stayed ungraded. For once, Maya let herself be the one who needed something. But here's the painful truth that Maya would only understand later. One phone call, no matter how honest, doesn't undo 38 years. It's a door opening, not a room rebuilt. And the weeks that followed were some of the most confusing of her life, because now that there was hope, she didn't know what to do with it. Hope, she was learning, is heavier than disappointment in some ways. Disappointment, at least, she knew how to carry. She called her therapist. Yes, she had her own, had for years, because capable people break too. They just usually do it in private, and she said, something happened, and I don't know if I'm happy or terrified. Her therapist said, why not both? Maya thought about that for a long time. Both. She was allowed to feel both. The joy of being finally seen, and the grief for all the years she wasn't. The door opening, and the ache for every year it stayed shut. She drove home from that session with the windows down. November cold. Savannah streets blurring past. She was, for the first time in a long time, not fine. And somehow, that felt like the most honest thing. What time is it where you're watching this? Drop in the comments. I love knowing when around the world people are sitting with stories like this one. 3 months after that phone call, Maya drove home to Savannah's north side, to the house on Clover Street where she'd grown up, for the first time without a holiday as an excuse. No Thanksgiving turkey. No Christmas lights. No birthday cake as a reason to be there. Just Maya, a weekday off, and something unfinished between her and her family that she was tired of leaving unfinished. She told her therapist about the visit the week before. Dr. Renee, a small woman with natural hair and reading glasses she was always losing on top of her head, had asked Maya what she was hoping to get from it. Maya had stared at the ceiling for a long moment. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just want to stop feeling like a guest in my own family. Dr. Renee had nodded slowly. And what if you go and that feeling doesn't change? Maya didn't have an answer for that. She drove home anyway. Her mother met her at the door with a long hug, longer than usual, the kind that meant something had shifted. The house smelled like it always did, coffee and the faint ghost of her father's aftershave, and something underneath it all that Maya could only describe as memory. The smell of a place that formed you whether you wanted it to or not. Her father was in the backyard. Of course he was. James had always retreated to his garden when things felt emotionally elevated, as if tomato plants were easier to tend than people. Maya watched him through the kitchen window for a moment before going out. He looked older. That caught her somewhere soft and unexpected. He was 64 now, moving a little slower, the gray in his hair total and complete. She remembered him as the man who seemed permanent, immovable, and here he was, mortal, her father. A man who had failed her quietly and loved her imperfectly, and was standing in his garden not knowing his daughter was watching him and feeling something for him that she couldn't quite name. She went outside. Hey, Dad. He turned, smiled, That same nod and smile. Reflexive, the one she knew so well. "Hey, babe. Didn't know you were coming today." "I know," she said. "I wanted it to be a normal visit, not a holiday." He nodded, turned back to his tomatoes. Maya stood there for a second. And she would later tell Dr. Renee that she didn't plan it, that it just came out of her like something that had been pressurized for years. She said,
"Dad."
"Can I ask you something?"
"Sure."
"Do you know me? Like, actually know me? What I care about, what I've built, who I am?" The question landed between them like something breakable. Her father went still. His hand rested on a tomato vine and stayed there. The silence stretched long enough that Maya almost took it back. Almost apologized, her old instinct, immediate, humiliating. But she didn't. She held the silence like Dr. Renee had taught her. Finally, her father turned around. His eyes were doing something she hadn't seen before. Not quite crying. James didn't cry. Or at least she'd never seen it, but something adjacent to it. A loosening. "I know you're the strongest person I've ever met," he said. "And I think I used that as an excuse.
To not worry. To not ask.
Because you always seemed like you had it." "I didn't always have it, Dad." "I know," he said quietly. "I know that now." It wasn't a full reconciliation. It wasn't some cinematic breakthrough with swelling music. It was a 64-year-old man with dirt on his hands and a daughter who had driven across town on a Tuesday because she was done being strong alone, and something small and real passing between them in a backyard where tomatoes grew in crooked rows. They didn't hug. They stood there together for a while looking at the garden. It was, Maya thought, the most honest moment they'd ever shared. She stayed for dinner. Her mother made too much food the way she always did. Derek called midway through some minor crisis predictably, and for the first time, her father let it go to voicemail. Maya noticed. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. If you've ever had a conversation that scared you but needed to happen, tell me about it in the comments. And tell me where in the world you're watching from. These stories connect us across so many borders. Maya turned 39 in April. She planned her own birthday again, but this time, it felt different. Not like patching a wound. More like building something intentional. She rented a studio space downtown for one evening. Set up her students' artwork on the walls. Pieces from the mural project, from the semester's figure drawing class, from the experimental unit she'd fought the school board to keep in the curriculum and won. She invited her friends, her colleagues, 2 former students who had become something closer to chosen family. And she invited her parents. They came. Both of them. On time. Her mother stood in front of a painting Maya had done herself, a large canvas, blues and burnt oranges, the silhouette of a woman driving with the windows down, and she was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to Maya and said, "You've been making this world your whole life, and I barely looked." Maya took her mother's hand.
"Didn't say anything."
There was nothing that needed saying. Her father walked the room slowly, reading every little card beside every student's piece. He spent the longest time in front of a charcoal drawing by a 16-year-old girl, a portrait of her grandmother, raw and precise and full of love. When Maya drifted near him, he said, "Your kids are something else."
"They are," Maya said.
"You did that," he said, still looking at the drawing. "You made that possible for them." She would remember those words for the rest of her life. Not because they erased anything. They didn't. 38 years of quiet invisibility doesn't vanish because of a few honest conversations and a Tuesday afternoon in a tomato garden. Healing, Maya had come to understand, is not a destination. It's a direction. It's waking up and choosing over and over to move towards something better rather than circling the same old wound. She still had hard days. Days when she caught herself apologizing for things that weren't her fault, or shrinking in conversations, or feeling that old familiar ache, the one that whispered you are too much and not enough, simultaneously and always. She probably always would. But she also had this, a studio full of color on a Thursday night in April. Her mother's hand in hers. Her father, quietly proud in a way he was only just learning to show. Friends who knew her real name, not the composed version she'd handed the world for years. She had a couch she loved, a houseplant she'd kept alive for 4 years, an achievement she considered genuinely impressive. She had students who came back years later to tell her she'd changed something for them. She had herself. Wholly, finally, unapologetically. At the end of the evening, after everyone had drifted out and she was alone in the studio turning off the lights, she stood in front of her own painting one last time. The woman in the canvas, windows down, going somewhere. Maya smiled at her. "You made it," she whispered. And she meant it for the woman in the painting. And she meant it for herself. If this story stayed with you, if any part of Maya felt familiar, leave a comment. Tell me what part hit hardest. Tell me what time it is where you are right now, wherever in the world you're watching from. Because stories like this remind us that the most private pain is often the most universal one. Thank you for watching. And if nobody has told you lately, the quiet, capable, invisible version of you deserved to be seen all along.